How was that? It was too short, right? Well, it's okay, because you know, when we get something that's really interesting, we can sit here and be in our little group talking about it for the next hour, right? But I think we should bring, you know, it just to get things kind of started up, and then we can bring all of this to the greater circle, okay? And get even more feedback on what you're talking about. How about that? So we're going to start out with, where's group 2? Okay, so did you pick out your person reporters? Okay. So each group have your reporters. So we're going to start at group 2, then we're going to go 3, 4, and 1. Okay?
Who got the first? Everybody in everyone?
Not yet. Not yet. We didn't get anyone here.
No.
No. We haven't done that part yet.
Oh, yeah, okay, I know. Right here.
It might not be enough.
This survey?
Oh, that's me.
Okay, so we're going to start off with group 2, and let's keep our voices and our, you know, responses down low enough where we don't have to raise our voices so much. Because we're going to be doing a lot of shopping tonight at the white party, right? So we got to save our energy and our voices to speak up then. Okay? So what was your question?
If you and your partner are open to change, can you create an opportunity to set boundaries around yourself that also make room for the relationship to grow and deepen?
Did everyone hear that question?
If you and your partner are open to change, we added how. How can you create an opportunity to set boundaries around yourself that also make room for the relationship to grow and deepen?
Okay, so what did you all come up with?
So we were talking about values. If you have strong values for yourself, there's committed action that has to follow that. Otherwise, values is just words, just statements that you make. But if you have, this has to be committed action. And we use the example of, you know, that's a boundary that I set for myself, is to always stay true to my values. And if I'm in alignment with that, then I also give room for my partner to have their feelings and stuff for our relationship to grow and deepen. And so we gave the example of, like, if you, your partner asks you to make a cup of tea for them, and you're not really feeling like it, or like you're in a bad mood or something, you could say, no, I'm not going to make the tea, make the tea yourself, or whatever. Or you can have those thoughts here, but because you have a value to be loving in the relationship, you still make the tea as an act of being loving, because that's what you value. So you allow your relationship to grow and deepen through that act of being loving, but you stay true to yourself too, right? You can still have your feelings,
right,
and your thoughts, but you get to choose how you want to act.
Okay. Anyone else have a response to that? Just the one that speak on it. Nobody? Do you want to get that question and reread it and see if anyone else have anything to say? And when we get ready to do the reporter, so it's like echoey in the room, if you would like, you can give Holly your question and she'll read it, and then you can just report on it, okay?
I'm pretty boisterous, so. If you and your partner are open to change, can you create an opportunity to set boundaries around yourself that also make room for the relationship to grow and deepen?
So we heard the response that group 2 gave, and I was asking for some more feedback. If anyone else had any other feedback?
I only had one thing, and that was, I can appreciate, we grow up with values, we create our own values, especially as we mature. And so I would have a set of values, and I'm a single person, and but we take it further. So what I've learned just in this little bit of time is I have those values, and I can see in those values where, as a partner, as a wife, when that time comes, then how do I operate with those values? And so that's a stretch beyond just having values.
Right.
But how do I want to operate in partnership or in relationship with someone in those values? And then, so it all fits. That's all.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Group 3.
Group three's here.
Uh-huh.
One of the questions we had said, what should you do when you become resentful of giving up vital parts of yourself, especially if these self-sacrifices are expected or demanded by your partner? We had a yin and yang on this. For me, I just had an issue with the word expected and demanded. Demanding. I think for me, compromise in a relationship for it to work. So if we're compromising, I don't know, maybe it's just the wording for me. You know, if you're going to compromise on something, I would do that no problem. But our yang to that, with this beautiful young lady here, she expects certain things from the get-go. You do explain it from the start, right? Elaine?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
She explained it at the start that she expects certain things from her potential partner.
Okay. Elaine, you want to share that?
Tired fam.
You don't have to.
No, I certainly will. I have this expectation of anyone that I date that they cook for me. And sometimes it's an issue and how people respond, like it's a domestic chore request. And it is that thing, but it's not coming from that place. It's coming from a place of, I have this void, and this is how, you can assist me and care for me and fill this void. And certainly I can cook myself, but there's something else that happens when my partner prepares a meal for me.
Now you spoke on it saying it's a void. A void is, from my perspective, a place of emptiness. And when I hear you say that I would expect my partner to fulfill this for me, I think in most circumstances it's not much to ask, but maybe it's the way it's presented. And if you could present it from a place of this is part of your love language, that you would like that, then it could be different, because I'm with you over here, and that's the reason that the question is strong, and I use strong language. So it can evoke emotions to help you think of what else I could do or think or ask instead of that thing,
So the other piece that came out, because that's how I approach it. I'm very transparent, and my void, just to share with the group, I lost my mother at an early age, and that was just one of the things that I enjoyed growing up. And surely I've learned to live with the void, you know what I mean? But this is one of these things that it soothes that moment for me.
Okay.
So it comes from that place, and my connection to whoever she is, I want her to be at that level, with me and for me, and I think I'm really clear in a very loving, deep way, and why that's necessary.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing that. Really honored you sharing that. I'm just going to speak a second more on this, and this not to dismiss anything that you're speaking on, because everything is valuable and it has its values. But as a person that's been in many, many relationships and many forms of relationships, and now as a relationship expert, sometimes, and this is some of the work I do, sometimes the expectations, even when they come from a loving place to our partners, can be not perceived in that same way. And sometimes that can cause a conflict in the relationship. So I just invite, everyone to think about it, the reasons that you may really truly need a particular thing from your partner, to be in a relationship, because we also must have our absolute must-haves, and we also must have our absolute won't accept. We just won't, it's not non-negotiable, and that's it. So, and we can talk further about some of those other things later in our segment tonight. But I just wanted to bring that up because sometimes we do want our partners to be all that we miss. And sometimes that can also trigger things in our partners or do something other. Anyone else have any response to this statement today?
Yeah, I wanted to also, I wanted to say in the first part of it, it says, what should you do when you become resentful? If you become resentful, got to that point, my 2 cents was either we need to seek counseling or we need to part ways. Because it can do nothing but go downhill. Resentment build up, and it'll build lower. From my experience.
So you're saying when you get resentful because your partner have these expectations and or demands, then you feel like you should go to therapy or
Yeah, if you haven't been able
do
to
something.
communicate it out and that other person can't understand where you're coming from, there's someone needs to intervene.
Okay. Anyone else have response to that? What do you do when you become resentful?
Well, I hope we have a conversation before we go to
resentment?
counseling.
Yeah.
I want to confer with you personally
Yeah.
and communicate needs or discomfort, frustration.
Talk to each other
Talk to
before
each other.
resentment even begin to set in. I agree.
You also have to look at yourself.
Go ahead.
You also have to look at yourself.
Yes.
And find out, where is that coming from?
Exactly.
Which it is, it starts with you.
Right. Right. It's how you are perceiving what your partner or whoever said. How you perceive it, how you interpret it is how you respond to it. Exactly. So,
No, I just wanted to add, thank you for your transparency and speaking on that. And like Dr. Tanya said, the reason for the language expectation and demand is because a lot of people do go into relationships with expectations and demands. They don't necessarily communicate them that way because they most likely wouldn't be received very positively if someone came in and said, here's my demands, here's my expectations. But if they're not being met, the resentment can build very quickly, especially if it's coming from a place of lack, where, like you shared, losing your mother at a young age created a gap, a hole, that part of you that needed to be soothed or nurtured. So there's you in the world seeking that out from your partner. So in a lot of ways, it's impossible for your partner to fill that void. So there's going to be a level of resentment that might also be lingering in that hole. So the sooner that you're able to look at yourself and see, how can I soothe myself so that my partner who comes in is only accentuating what's already there. They're not filling a gap or filling a void.
Soothing yourself, that's a whole different subject. I've done some work for self-healing, but it's different, than someone touching your skin and me touching my own skin.
absolutely it's different. But again, what we're speaking of is how it may be perceived and presented to your partner. Absolutely. That's what relationships are about. It's about sharing the wholeness and the whole self and the wholeness of who you bring to the relationship. I have this saying, if you bring a broken you to the relationship, your relationship starts out in a deficit. So it's your responsibility to become as solid as you can, because all of us have broken pieces. Like Dorothy said, where you're broken, pour some gold in there, because you never lose your value. When you're broken, you take care of being broken. It doesn't make you less than because you're broken, but you have to work on it. You have to fix it, to look into others, be it your partner, your children, or others, to fix that, pour your gold for you. You will continue to live in the deficit. So no matter what relationship it is, if you don't bring a solid enough self, that relationship starts off at a deficit. And hopefully the people in the relationship is solid enough to come and work together and heal together. So
Yeah.
it doesn't mean once you get in a relationship,
Yeah.
nothing else happens.
Yeah.
You still heal together,
I should.
but you cannot expect your partner to fix you
No.
because there is some emptiness there. And that's why we don't stay in relationships. We're always looking for something or somebody else. There's something loose or broken or missing or void. Okay, thank you. Group 4?
Take the juicier question. Which is okay to do, sacrificing or compromising in your relationship. So we had a bit of difference of opinions, and they kind of could see the value in both. So the example I used was typically when we hear the word sacrifice, it has a negative, automatically go to this negative place. And as we were sharing, I was thinking about with my wife and I, she was at a great job, decided she wanted to leave it and do private practice. And so that in that way, there was a compromise, a sacrifice that we had to make that allowed her to branch out and do that, right? And so that way, it wasn't a negative thing. It was something that was necessary for us to do that so that she can live her best life. I don't want her to keep going to a place where she hated. I would rather that she did something that she really loved, and we have to sacrifice. If that meant we couldn't travel this year because the business was getting off the ground, and that's what we did. So that was the way we talked about sacrifice. You want to say anything about compromise?
Compromise, we saw as more of like a balance, a way of, okay, you want this today, we'll do that, but let's say tomorrow I want something different, or I want to do something different, then we do that. But then you have to be careful about being careful with that, because if you're always compromising, I guess it starts bordering on to the sacrifice. So if I'm always saying, oh, okay, yeah, we can just do this today, it starts going, if I do that too often and it doesn't come back, then it starts going towards sacrifice.
Anyone else want to speak on sacrifice and compromise?
What was the question? Would you rather, not would you rather, which is okay to do, sacrifice or compromise?
I think sometimes one can be the other. I think if you're in a loving relationship, and I think maybe you've got to be there for a minute to recognize if it's a loving relationship between two people, then a sacrifice can be considered a compromise. If you care for that person, at that point, it may feel like, I don't know, I just think that you may want to, while keeping your individuality, that's a big thing to me, because I've lost it so much. So while keeping your individuality, if you care for that person, then they know not to put a lot of demands on you. But even if they do sometimes, then the compromise is worth holding on to the relationship without it being abusive. I mean, as far as you feeling like you're being used.
There is a difference in sacrifice and compromise, even though the way we've lived and been socialized in our world, in most society general, that word is kind of interchanged, compromise and sacrifice, but they're both very different. You want to speak on that, Alan?
I would love to. This is actually something that I worked very, very closely with Dr. Tanya, and understanding and also implementing the difference in my own life. A sacrifice is something that you do in order to please your partner in exchange or giving up your authentic self. Whereas a compromise is something that you do as an agreement between the both of you. And it doesn't mean that it's going to be completely comfortable, but at the same time, you guys are both making that agreement together and it works for both of you as a partnership, and you're not giving up yourself in exchange to make them happy, which is the difference between a sacrifice and a compromise. And I'll even use myself as an example. Within my relationship, I've always identified as being poly, as being open, and my partner identifies as being strictly monogamous. In past relationships, I never wanted to give that up because I felt like it would have been a complete and utter sacrifice for me. But for my partner currently, because I took the time to understand him and understand where he's coming from and how he felt, I was okay with putting that part of me aside for the sake of us having these conversations while we figure out what worked for both of us. That way, I'm not sacrificing a part of me in which I love about myself, and he doesn't feel unheard.
Anybody else want to speak on that? You want to say anything about that?
Well, yeah, I'll piggyback on what Hallie was saying, is that in sacrifice, there's one winner. In compromise, there's two.
Exactly.
It's the simplest way for me to
Exactly.
relate to it, is that when you're compromising, it's a win-win. And when you are building a healthy, sustainable, loving relationship, you would like every agreement to be a win-win. Because if it's a win-win, then resentment doesn't really have room. You know what I mean? There's not an area for that to build because both partners are winning constantly. So knowing that that's okay, and like you were saying, is that if it gets to be too much and it's like I'm compromising too much, I'm giving too much, that's starting to look more like a sacrifice. Because as soon as you feel like it's too much, you're not winning.
Exactly.
So just so I'm clear, the way you all said that, what I said was a compromise and not a sacrifice.
It sounds like a compromise, exactly, because there was an agreement between the two of you. The win was for your partner, your wife, to be able to explore a new career. And the win for you was that it didn't require you to give anything up in exchange for that, other than maybe, like you said, travel or something like that. But the win too was that you get a partner who's happy and healthy and satisfied with her career, which I'm guessing is probably a good thing.
Yeah, she's very happy, I'm happy.
There you go.
I can travel here. So.
Yeah.
And it seemed like that outweighed the alternative.
Yes, it did. The way you described
Completely. You
it.
guys are both on the same space and the same page. Therefore, it was a positive compromise between the both of you.
Right.
So I get your question in just a minute. So what I do is I invite everyone here, when you are faced with that in your relationships, that's not just your partnering relationship, any at work, your children, kids are always trying to make you do something you don't want to do. You know, I'm a mother, grandmother, and a great-grandmother, so I know, okay? So just take what we're saying here, when it's a win-win, that's a compromise. And you can still smile, and it can take you the long journey. It doesn't fizzle out. When it's a sacrifice, resentment sets in, you start devaluing the relationship, devaluing the person, devaluing the job, you know, and start projecting all kind of things that may or may not be there. So again, we are taught to interchange that, but they are completely different things. You had something to say?
Oh, I was just gonna give like this light example, but so when I was 16, I made a wedding book, like my dress, my this, my that. Like I had this vision of how I wanted to be asked. I wanted this big romantic way and all of this stuff. And when I met my wife, she had never thought about being married, and I sacrificed my wish to be asked a certain way and gave it to her.
Mm-hmm.
So I gave her my vision.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that I was always going to have that little bit of longing for having that big romantic ask, but I gave it to her. I sacrificed that and gave it to her. So, because you can only really be asked once, right? I mean, and I gave her that. And then as we started to plan the wedding, we had to do a lot of compromising around what she wanted, what I wanted, what she wanted. So that wasn't really a sacrifice. That was truly compromising. But the, will you marry me? the way that I did it, I gave that to her. And that was always my thing that I held, that that's how I wanted to be asked.
Okay, but did you resent doing that? Because this is what we were trying to
But-
say, we
There were
sacrifice.
times when I did. There were
Okay.
times when I did because it was mine. I had it all my life that I held on to it. That
But you gave it away. You willingly gave it to your wife.
yes.
She didn't come and say, if you don't give it to me, I'm not marrying you, or we won't be together anymore.
No.
Or, so you get what I'm saying? A sacrifice usually also is accompanied by a spoken or unspoken demand or expectation. This is what you're supposed to do, okay? So that's what usually happens, and it usually happens in relationships non-verbally, because you get in a relationship and, you know, our culture says, when I say our culture, I'm just saying it doesn't matter what your gender preferences are or any of that. It's about the American culture, whatever you want to call it, that we're living in, how we're socialized. We're taught, you're supposed to expect that, you know, certainly that's a lot on the white horse, we're taught all of that. And so if you love this person enough that you gifted that to her, then it wasn't a sacrifice, it was a compromise. You were willing to give her that, and that was your love language of showing your love.
It
So-
felt like a sacrifice.
Okay.
And it might have felt like a sacrifice because you were attached to it since you were 16 years
Right.
old.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's something to explore there too, which is why am I attached to this vision that I had when I was a child? And what feeling was I hoping to experience as a result of having that vision come true? Because the feeling that you were hoping to experience may very well have happened in your actual marriage, in your actual wedding, in your actual partner. It might not have come from that specific ask in that specific way, but the feeling is what you're really manifesting.
How long have you all been married?
A year in October.
A year.
Okay. I was there. Okay. All right. Let's come back into focus. Group one.
You all actually already started answering and talking about the question, which is what is your definition of compromise?
Okay. You got another question?
How does the feeling of merging contribute to you feeling like you're losing your identity or losing yourself in the relationship? Okay, we had a problem with the word merging. We weren't really sure about what that meant, so we had to get some clarification. And the clarification was in basically how other people see us. So we're a couple, you know, other people see us as a couple, so how do we feel about that? Do we feel like we're losing, you know, ourselves and our identity in that relationship? And the whole feeling of, once we did get to the explanation of merging, I think we basically said that losing yourself in a relationship, for me, it comes down to identity. You know, if I know who I am, you know, as an individual, other people seeing us as a couple, really shouldn't matter. On the other hand, maybe it should. You know, we all want our own identity. We always want our own, you know, we always want to be known as ourselves and recognized as ourselves and who we are. So,
Well, if you look at that question from that perspective, then yes, but that's outside of you. And you again are addressing something even beyond that merging experience with your partner, because you're thinking about how others see you. The merging, the coming together is about the experience of being with your partner, not how you're viewed by other people, even though that happens as well. And that's something that I talk about in my trainings, because people take your identity away. You know, they can see you and automatically see your partner. Your partner could be in another country. And they say, yeah, they were there, and no. You know? And I mean, that's true, but it does happen. You know, when you see one person, you automatically, in your mind's eye, see the other person, you know, or you don't remember the other person's name, you just know one name, you know, and it happens just different ways. But getting back to that question, can you read that again?
How does the feeling of merging contribute to you feeling like you're losing your identity or losing yourself in the relationship?
Anybody want to speak on that?